Welcome to the Why on Earth Communities Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series. Today we have with us Scott Hoffman Black. Hi, Scott.
Hello, how are you all doing?
Doing great. So great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Scott Black is the Executive Director of the Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. He is an internationally renowned conservationist who has been at the forefront of the pollinator conservation movement for 2 decades. At Xerces Society, which under his leadership has become the premier invertebrate conservation organization in North America, Scott's work has led to protection and restoration of habitat on hundreds of thousands of acres of rangelands, forests, and farmland, as well as protection for many endangered species. He is an author of the best-selling book, Attracting Native Pollinators and Gardening for Butterflies, and has written more than 200 other publications. His work has been honored with several awards, including the 2011 Colorado State University College of Agricultural Sciences Honor Alumnus Award and the U.S. Forest Service Wings Across the Americas 2012 Butterfly Conservation Award. Despite working at the national scale, Scott remains involved at the grassroots level and understands how to adapt conservation practices to local communities and local places, including his own garden, which he tends with his wife and children. Scott, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, I'm excited to talk.
So let's kick things off. What's the issue? What are we dealing with here? Why does this even matter to us?
Well, it matters to us because insects and other invertebrates are really the foundation of life on the planet. You know, think of it this way. If you want to see salmon in our streams, you can thank a fly that fed those salmon when they were little before they made it into the ocean. If you want to eat good, healthy, tasty fruits and vegetables, you can thank a pollinator that has pollinated those crops that allowed us to have the food that we eat. If you like songbirds in your yard, you can really thank an insect. About 88% of songbirds need an insect to feed either themselves or their young. Need lots of insects, actually. So really, the insects and the plants on the planet I see as really the fabric of the planet. And unfortunately, we're tearing that fabric to pieces.
Yeah, and what is causing that? How are we tearing that fabric to pieces?
Well, unfortunately, humans have an extremely large footprint, ecologically speaking. Unlike other animals who tend to have a footprint that is really proportional to their size, humans tend to build their houses. We tend to crop in a way. We tend to really build all of our shopping centers. At the expense of all the other animals' habitat. We put in concrete, we put in bluegrass, we put in monocultural crops, we ruin the soil, we use pesticides. So the real issue, unfortunately, is us using more than our fair share. And then to break it down, really for insects and almost all other animals, the issues really come down to habitat loss. We tend to build or grow our crops in areas that used to be habitat for wildlife. Poisons. We tend to spray lots and lots and lots of insecticides, herbicides, and other pesticides that are harmful to these animals. And then diseases really are an emerging issue that are spreading around the planet that are causing negative impacts to many of our wildlife species, from bats to bumblebees. Many other issues as well, but they all generally fall into those 3 categories.
Yeah, okay, that's really helpful. So habitat loss, poisons, including pesticides, and diseases. Now, these sound to me, especially when you're describing urban and suburban development patterns. These sound like decisions that are being made and phenomena that are occurring by us humans, but not necessarily things each one of us can necessarily do anything about in our day-to-day lives. Are there solutions? Are there opportunities that we might make changes in our own lives that would help with the situation?
Yeah, you know, the really neat thing about insect conservation, whether you're thinking about pollinators or whether you love butterflies or whether you're just interested in biodiversity, is that everybody can take action. This is one of the really neat things why I love the work that I do. I have worked on all sorts of animals, reintroduction of wolves, protection of salmon, even work on grizzly bears. Really, really important. These large, charismatic animals, we should all be working towards their conservation, but not everybody can, you know, go out and protect habitat for a grizzly bear. But everybody can go out and protect habitat for a bee or a butterfly. And it's really, the neat thing is it's really simple. It's providing a buffet of flowers out in your landscape. So, you know, think about all of these little animals that are so important for us and for ecosystems, and just think about they need to eat throughout the entire season. So having flowering plants that flower from spring and then cascades of flower all summer and into fall is really important. That way you're feeding the most bees and butterflies as possible. Number two, as I mentioned, pesticides are a big issue. And we can all do better. We, you know, in most cases, we don't need to use any pesticides, you know, especially insecticides or herbicides in our urban environment. And one thing I'd like to point out is oftentimes urban folks point to farmers as, you know, they're using all these pesticides, but actually the U.S. Geological Service in their studies routinely shows that we are using more insecticides in urban and suburban environments than we are in agriculture, which is astounding because it's really the quest for the perfect lawn and the perfect rows. So let your yard get a little wild, put in flowers, you know, stop using pesticides, and then what we like to say is equally important, go tell your neighbors why you're doing it. Because they might be quizzical why all of a sudden your yard has changed and it's so beautiful with all these flowers. Let them know that you're protecting wildlife, including the bees and butterflies that are so important for us and our livelihoods.
Well, you know, at the Y on Earth community, one of our favorite things to think about and talk about and act on is that underlying why. That's one of the threads of meaning through all the work that we're doing. And, you know, one of the things I'm hearing through all of this is that there are actions we can be taking at the individual level, the household level. And when it comes to the neighborhood and community level, boy, there's a great excuse in here to connect even more with our neighbors, with our cohabitants in our communities. And my gosh, what a fabulous byproduct to have out of these actions we can take.
It's a fabulous byproduct, and that's why I like the work that you do so much, is it's making these connections. And what I really feel strongly about is that if we can bring this nature also back into our communities, we will have more people experiencing nature. Yeah. I mean, it's harder as our cities grow for many people to go out, you know, to maybe our national forests or national parks and see wildlife. But it's pretty easy to go to the local park. And if the local park has wildlife such as bees and butterflies and birds, people are going to get a nature experience. I mean, I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm the youngest of 10 kids, and we didn't have a lot of money. We didn't really go on big vacations. But I had what we called was the forest about 2 blocks from my house. And the forest was really just a mixture of meadow and trees on a 2-block area that had not been developed. And it had an ephemeral stream, meaning a stream part of the year that would go through it. I was there every day collecting, you know, snakes, frogs, catching fireflies at night and butterflies during the day. I was really experiencing nature. And I wonder, had I not had that experience, whether I would be thinking the way I do today. So to me, the neat thing about pollinator conservation or insect conservation at large is we can both help the small animals that are helping us, but also help our communities to reconnect with nature. And again, I sound exuberant when I talk about this because to me, in a time when it seems like we have so many negatives, this is a really positive way that folks in their own lives can take action that really resonate out to animals that we need to think about, but also the other people in our neighborhoods, or maybe people in other neighborhoods that can come in to our neighborhoods and see wildlife close to home.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm struck that more and more we are hearing from the medical community, from folks working in psychology and counseling and so forth, identifying that more and more of us seem to be suffering from something that's called nature deficit disorder. And the great writer Thomas Berry indicated that perhaps as we disconnect from nature, not only are we beginning to suffer in terms of our relationships, connection with this living planet, not only are we beginning to suffer in terms of our imaginations, but we also may be suffering literally in terms of our intelligence as a species. And it seems to me that there is a certain type of patterning and intelligence and relationship we learn only from nature. We probably won't learn as well from books or spreadsheets or media and what have you. And so I just, there's such an important piece here that is about our human beingness and nourishment that I hear running through the message that you're describing.
Oh, it is so true. You know, and beyond that, to the real practical is the more people can experience nature, the more they will take. I mean, there's good studies on this. The more kids understand the environment and understand nature, the more likely they're going to want to have their tax dollars and their policies go to protect nature when they grow up. So to me, getting people out, of course, all ages, but getting kids out is particularly important because unfortunately, the downside is we've let that pendulum swing a long way into the negative. We're seeing declines in most of our wildlife species across the planet. And we really do need to focus on all areas. Again, I don't want to just talk about urban or suburban areas to the exclusion of large natural areas, which we certainly need to protect. And farmland, we have lots of farmers who really get the connection now between pollinators and their crops and are really changing their practices and incorporating a habitat into that. But by bringing, whether it's on a farm and bringing nature back, whether it's in a neighborhood or in the canyons up by Boulder, near where you live, we really need to be focusing on these habitats. And the neat thing is doing it close to home. Again, as you've mentioned, we have all of these multiple benefits, not just to the wildlife, but to us and our human spirit.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I so love this call to connect with place, to do these things in our homes, our neighborhoods, the parks and wildlands in our vicinities. And when I'm hearing the mention of the agriculture, one of the things that strikes me is each one of us is eating and drinking various beverages, you know, day by day throughout the week. And so, although not all of us are actually farmers, we're all connected to farms. And the more we can choose for our own health and for the well-being of our planet to purchase a few more products being grown organically, being grown in a regenerative economic and ecological framework, and perhaps biodynamic and some of these other emerging systems that are available, we can help what's occurring on those farms as well and build markets for these farming families that are making this transition right now that's so important.
Oh, I so believe that we can um, uh, do good deeds through our buying habits. Buying organic, buying biodynamic. The Xerces Society right now is rolling out a new certification program called Be Better Certified. That is the first certification program specifically designed to incorporate habitat for bees and other pollinators into farms and to change how pesticides are used. And Be Better Certified really coolly goes really well with biodynamic and goes really well with organic. So our pocketbooks can be a really important resource because by rewarding those farmers who are taking that more difficult step, we will get more and more farmers to take that difficult step to become more sustainable, to become biodynamic, to become organic, to become Be Better certified, and we can really have a impact on a large area. And one thing I do like to point out is, over 40% of all land on Earth is in agriculture. So if we're going to solve these problems, we need to work in cities and towns, we need to work in rural areas, and we need to work in agriculture, and of course protect the wild areas that we have. And as you mentioned, think about what you buy. It's better for the planet and it's better for your kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that the Y on Earth community that we really stress and embody and practice is that when we're sharing information, we share as much or even more inspiration around steps we can take, action that we can incorporate into our day-to-day lives. And I think that's so important. That said, I think there's an opportunity here to share with our audience just how severe and sad, frankly, the global situation is. Some folks may hear things like insect apocalypse, and I know some of our listeners are familiar that we are in the midst of what looks like one of the great 6 greatest species extinction events on the planet, and that our geologic records show us that those previous 5 were probably caused by huge volcanic events or meteor strikes from space, massive events like this. And this thing we're experiencing right now, we see is actually significantly caused by our human activity. And Scott, I don't want to linger on a doom and gloom feeling or note here, but I want to make sure we're really calling a spade with respect to our current situation. And would you speak to that?
Yes, and that's really important in all of the conversations I have around this issue. In a way, first I really depress people with all of the statistics, all of the bad information, and then I try to talk about the solutions, because to me, and working at the Xerces Society, a science-based conservation organization, you really do need to understand the problem before you can come up with real solutions. But you are right, we're in the 6th great extinction event on the planet, and we are the cause. And when it comes to insects and other invertebrates, I talked about how important they are, but the data is really startling. And it isn't something that's happened overnight, although we're now finally talking about this. About 15 years ago, I and some others started talking about what we called the windshield phenomenon. When I was a kid, I talked about growing up in Nebraska. I wasn't thinking about climate change. I was mostly thinking about cool cars and girls. And I had a 1971 Mach 1 Mustang, and I would drive it around Nebraska, probably too fast, and don't need to bless my departed mom. Luckily, she didn't know how fast. But one of the things I was always doing is cleaning my car. It was important to me. It was a status symbol at the time when I was 18, and I know a little silly, but I was cleaning it a lot, and I was cleaning it a lot because it was covered in bugs. I go back to these areas, or I have been back, and about 15 years ago, I started emailing around going, I am not, when I go back to Nebraska, I'm not cleaning my car. Where are all the insects going? We did not have all the data then, but many of us were already seeing something was awry. Unfortunately, since that time, we've started to get the data, and there is really compelling data. Data out of Germany that shows that flying insect biomass, so think about this as the weight of these little insects. And when you think about the weight of insects, think again about birds, because the more insects that are out there, the more they have to eat. We've seen a 75% decline in insect biomass in the last 27 years. In Puerto Rico natural areas, they've seen even worse declines and have linked insect declines to declines in birds and to lizards. We're seeing declines in all sorts of really important species, from butterflies. In England, we're seeing, which has a long history of monitoring butterflies, 100 years and more of studying them, we're seeing really catastrophic declines. New emerging studies in the United States show similar trends. You know, with bumblebees, we've seen a 28% of bumblebees are at risk of extinction. You know, and then you go to the monarch butterfly, which the monarch butterfly has declined across the country by likely 80%, but in the West, it's declined by over 99%. So these animals all had a place in the planet. They all had a place in the planet as part of an ecosystem and ecosystem function. And as they go, we lose these pieces of the puzzle, which are our ecosystem, which then we start to see cracks. So that is really where we're at. We're in a really negative place at the moment. But then coming back to the positive, as I mentioned, I think the neat thing is that we can do something about it. Humans have caused these problems, and humans can help fix them. You know, we've done things like gone to the moon. We've done things like after World War II, rebuilt countries and helped them get back on a good footing through the Marshall Plan. You know, we really need a plan for biodiversity across the planet, and we all need to be engaged in it.
Absolutely, Scott. Thank you for sharing that with us. And one of the things we're talking about increasingly through the Y on Earth community is massively mobilizing the stewardship and regeneration behaviors and functions that each of us can embody more and more. And you know what you guys have in terms of resources at your website, xerces.org, that's xerces.org, is tremendous. And when I was looking at the website recently, I was struck by how much information was on just that one section called the Pollinator Conservation Resource Center, which has all kinds of amazing information and tools that that we can utilize right now today. And would you maybe just share a little with us about what our audience might find when they visit the site?
Yeah, you know, the Xerces Society, really our whole goal is to take science and make it applicable. So take science into practice. And that's really what we try to do through our website. And just to take one step back, because people might be wondering on this podcast, the Xerces Society, that is a funny name. The Xerces Society is named after the first butterfly known to go extinct due to humans in North America, and that was the Xerces Blue Butterfly. As San Francisco expanded in the 1940s, due to the war effort, actually, they built on the last of this butterfly's habitat. And our goal is to provide education, outreach, technical assistance and resources, so that that doesn't happen again. But our website is really rich with information that we have tried to make applicable, whether you're a gardener and are looking for a plant list, you love monarchs and you want a plant list that works for Colorado or Maine or California. These would all be different plant lists, and we've tried to really provide those resources, as well as resources for the more technical land manager or roadside manager on how they might manage for biodiversity, including increasing the number of pollinators alongside roads. So our real goal is to provide that applicable information that you can pick up on our website. Anybody can download it. Almost all of our information is free to download. We have a few books there that they're just too long to download, but everything else is free. Please go check it out. And then we also have staff on hand that if you run into problems or you have a question, please do reach out. We will get back to you and try to give you any advice that we can on the project that you're hoping to complete. Because to us, again, our goal is to, at the end of the day, help people to take action for the little things that run the world.
It's so fabulous, an incredible resource. I just want to pause and remind our audience that this is the Why on Earth Communities Stewardship and Sustainability podcast series. And today we are speaking with the Executive Director of the Xerces Society, Scott Hoffman Black. And I want to mention to our audience that you can find incredible resources at xerces.org. Again, that's xerces.org. And if you would like, you can find some other great resources, ebooks, audiobooks at the whyonearth.org website, and use the code whyonearth to get some discounts on those downloadable products. Also want to mention that our podcast is distributed through Google Play, the iTunes App Store, Stitcher. Please leave a review there on the platform of your choice. That really helps us build our connections to others all around the world and help spread this important information. And finally, just want to share a little teaser. We have our next children's book coming out in a few weeks, which is called Celebrating Honeybees, which is a story talking about this relationship with pollinators, an adventure with little brother and sister. And at the back of this children's book are a variety of resources that will also be helpful. And hopefully we'll have some info in there about Xerces as well, Scott. So I just wanted to make sure we mentioned all of that to our audience. And, Scott, I really appreciate this information and all of these steps we can be taking. In these last few minutes of our discussion, I'd love to just kind of ask you personally, you mentioned your wife and kids. How did you get into this work, and what does it mean for you today as obviously a professional, but also a dad, to be doing this kind of work?
Yes, I got into this work in an interesting way. I mentioned how I grew up. We didn't have a lot of resources, but we were fine. I always had enough to eat. I had loving parents. And I had parents that actually cared for the outdoors. They would take us out when they could to the park or the local natural area, and even farther when we got a chance. I fell in love with nature, as I mentioned. But after I got out of high school, I really went to work. I worked in a variety of jobs, from construction, worked on oil rigs, worked in the timber industry for a while, but the whole time I was feeling kind of empty and kind of seeing that the work that I was doing was maybe not the best for the planet. And I went back to school with really the sole purpose of understanding the science of conservation, not so I could be some deep thinker, which we need, by the way, scientists that would be the professor at a university my whole goal was really to take that science, that conservation science, and make it applicable, whether it was to protect national forests, to protect, old growth and wild rivers, or to protect prairies, or pollinators and salmon and wolves and these animals. And as I've aged and gotten married and had kids, this has become even more important. Our kids are going to inherit what we leave them, and I'm just going to spend the rest of my days making this world as good of a place as possible for them. But it's also really neat to see them and see how my work has affected them, and how they now think about the natural world, and how they think about animals. And when we go out, my son knows more about bees than probably most people out there on the planet, and it's really fun to see. And then just to end, the neat thing again about nature is that you can find nature wherever you are. And one of the things I really suggest to folks who are really interested in the small animals and interested in pollinator conservation in their yard is as you plant these plants, and as you change your yard to make it more wildlife friendly, make sure you spend some time there. Take a chair out on a beautiful sunny day and take your favorite drink, whether that's a lemonade, or I don't know, I'm not a huge drinker, but a gin and tonic or something, and sit amongst your flowers and start to look at the little animals that are visiting them. And I've been saying this for a long time, and so many people come back to me and are astounded by the animals that they see in and around them in their yard, if they just sit and take the time to look. So this is kind of my meditation. I just go out in my chair with my lemonade, and I just see what's out, kind of commune with nature in my own yard. And I think it's something that can bring up our spirits and keep us moving forward when our day-to-days are often can become drudgery and the news all seems bad. Don't just work in nature. Don't just try to fix nature. Make sure you go out and spend the time there so that you're being rewarded by what you're doing.
It's such a fabulous message. And, in writing the book, Why on Earth, there's actually a chapter there called Delight that speaks to this very thing, the importance of our human experience of just being with, connecting with these natural places and really delighting in that. And it's so nourishing for us. Of course, the science is showing more and more that taking the time for this kind of pausing, slowing down is actually improving our cognitive performance. It is actually reducing stress hormones. It is actually improving serotonin production, which makes us feel good. It's antidepressant. We have all the science showing us this stuff. And I find with my, grandparents and others, this was an experience they knew to be true without having the science to verify it. But boy, that piece, and especially in our busy, busy lives, seems to be such an important kernel of wisdom, Scott.
Well, it works for me. I know that I come in feeling better than when I went out. So hopefully it does for others as well.
Well, it has been such a delight to talk with you today, Scott, and thank you for all the work you're doing and for all of the resources you're making available to us all around the planet. And I just want to invite you, before we sign off from our discussion today, is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we say goodbye for now?
Well, I would just say, if you can do something, do something. Whether it is changing the way or thinking about how you buy food, or other things, and changing that. Whether it is putting a single plant or 2 or 3 or 4 plants in your yard, whether it is thinking about getting rid of any pesticides you might have in your garage. just start taking those steps. And the neat thing about those steps is you tend to then take more and more and more and more, because there's such a positive from that start. It's kind of like once you leave your door and start walking, you never know where you're going to end up. So, after this, go out and take a step. Think about what step you could take, and that step hopefully will lead to others, and hopefully will lead to others taking steps, and together we can truly make this world a better place.
Absolutely. What a beautiful message to leave on. And Scott, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, and have a great day. I really, really enjoyed the conversation.
Likewise. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.